What would I do without you? And not because of it, because of so many reasons. Okay, so dear guys, we are now on our last month of the course, and things are starting to sit together, and the puzzle is already I think that the picture is less vague, and the puzzle is starting to get organized. Next week, I'll have a small summary when I start speaking, but I want to open, before I let Art start speaking, I want to open, and please hold your seats, with our final session. Our final session will be on August 31st. And we put on the syllabus the topic of AI KM future. And at the beginning, we thought to give the new trends, where are we going? But we found that, first of all, I spoke about it already on some of these trends when I spoke about the AI milestones. But much more important than that, we can all find it on the internet. So we decided, the course management team, not to tell you what will be in the future, but to ask you what will be in our coming immediate future. In other words, we are preparing a different session in which each one of the people that are in this course, and also want to be certificate, and also want to have their thoughts and had time to speak but not enough, will have to present 1 minute, one slide. I will show it to you. I will, of course, send it to you. Just a moment. Each one of us will have to present 1 minute, one slide. Your turn. First of all, telling us who he or she is. Now, the question is as following. Assuming that we have no constraints, no political constraints, no technology constraints, we can do whatever we wish. What AI project would I start or join? What would be my role as a knowledge manager in this project? We learned so many ways how an KMer can contribute to these projects. What is my contribution? And if you want to add, so please add what additional knowledge or skills I think I need to acquire or develop in order to achieve a successful outcome. Because maybe if you send these all out, so other people will suggest, or maybe we will suggest and send you to read materials after the course. So this is the template. I will send it out, and we are going to ask you to send it to me up front until August 27th, 4 days before the last session. Take all your thoughts, ask yourself, what did I take? What could I do? No constraints, no problems. I have the budget, I have the technology, I have I'm known in the organization, people trust me, and they'll let me do the job. What would I do in AI means in the perspective of the KMer? So this is a slide, this is the question, and you will be sending these slides to me. I will join them to one presentation, and if we have time, we will enable everyone to speak. If there are some people who want only to show the slide and not to speak loudly, we will handle that as well. So we'll see how many people send it, and we will find the exact formula how to run this session. So this is our task. This is your task. And we are really, really waiting to hear what you want to do tomorrow morning, if you could really start doing it. And if not tomorrow, maybe next year or next month or somewhere else, or sometimes else. So that's for the task. If anyone has questions, I'll send this slide today with the materials if I don't forget. B, you can ask at the end of this session if we have time. And C, you can email me, write me, call me, text me, whatever is convenient, and I will explain and discuss with whoever has questions or any other comments. I now do not want to take too much time from Art's lecture today. Today, Art, go back, last week we spoke about the knowledge engineering process. So now we have the knowledge that we learned out of the machine and out of the people, out of the humans and out of the machine. And we want to ask ourselves, how do we implement it? How do we maintain this human and machine knowledge that we learned? So Art, please, you may start and share your wisdom with us all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mariah. Give me a second here to bring up my screen sharing. And all right, hope everybody can see that. Yeah, and the comments are coming in the chat box, Maria. People seem to like the idea of that final session, which I think will be very great. Okay, we're at session 18, implementing and maintaining human and machine knowledge. And you had a pre-class assignment ahead of this, a couple of articles, and some thought questions and these are things to think about that are very important right now as we enter this age of, as we mentioned last week, hyper automation, where more and more of what we do, whether it be simple transactional work or actual knowledge work, is either performed by or assisted by AI. So, but you think about, hey, it doesn't always work, right? So where can AI has gone rogue, and you can find examples of that. So think yourself in your work situation or wherever you might be planning on interjecting AI, where can it go rogue? And then the next question would be, how do you detect and respond to that if it does happen? And how can you limit it from happening? Hold on, I'm trying to adjust here. My control panel is blocking part of my slide. Okay. All right, so today, the purpose of our session today is to do three things. Know how to formulate and enact a governance model for your organization and its growing body of knowledge. And as Moria said, human and machine knowledge together. And I think we know by now it's not humans alone, it's not computers alone, it's both working together, because we accomplish much more when both are together than anyone alone could. And then identify metrics for monitoring performance impacts. We touched upon that a little bit before, and so that's got to be part of it. Part of what keeps the whole thing going is answering the question, should we keep on doing this, or why are we doing this? Well, it all boils down to organizational performance. You've got to gain something out of it. And if you don't, then you need to make, as we say here, necessary adjustments. And then the third thing, it still involves a lot of coordination, not just the AI development team and not just the KM group. In order to really effectively apply AI in an organization requires cooperation across all units, all staff units and all business units, especially project management, HR, systems engineering, you name it. And then how do you cut into those organizations and understand what each organization's role is, and maybe what other additional skills development they need to do in order to successfully achieve those roles or accomplish those roles. Right, so that's what we're up against today. Now, we touched upon in KM leveraging AI projects. Here's our course knowledge graph, and we started by mapping problems, opportunities, and risks. And then last week we went really deep into data models and algorithms. I promise I'll go easier on you this week than I did last week. Last week, we really got into the meat of how to take those business problems in session 16 and apply them across data models and algorithms to make it real. But now it's implementing, right? We've done the design here in 17. In 18, we're implementing and maintaining those knowledge systems, human and machines working together. And the subtopics will be knowledge governance, managing and mitigating those risks, AI going rogue and the like, and we'll talk about both internal and external risks. Then training and maintaining the AI systems. Remember, just like we have to train and maintain maintain people, you have to train and maintain AI. Knowledge does not manage itself, especially in an AI system, right? It takes human adult supervision. So we're going to talk about that. And then the human capital side, we've got to keep training ourselves because the AI is zooming ahead, and in many aspects, we humans are falling behind. It's hard for us to keep up to speed with what's going on the technology side. So you've got this back and forth, and trying to maintain that imbalance is something to consider. And then finally, the performance impacts. Why are we doing this? And making sure, because we only have so many resources, making sure that we are directing our efforts in those areas that provide the best results. Okay, hope that makes sense. All right, then onward. So quick summary of what we covered last week in one slide, a one-slide summary of everything we covered. So this is it. And as I said, my purpose was not, I couldn't teach you to become a knowledge engineer or an ontologist, everything in 1 hour. But if anything, I hopefully gave you an appreciation for, yes, it is very involved. It's not something that you can do quite easily. If we're going to do it right, there are a lot of different elements and a lot of different moving parts involved, as we saw last week. So the question becomes, what holds all of this together? How do we actually make it real and make it happen? That's the question we're addressing today. And so where can we start with holding it all together? It all starts with knowledge governance, human and machine knowledge governance. So let's first talk about that. Okay, quick survey, to a little thought question for everybody, plain sheet of paper, just for fun. Do you know how many business rules your organization has? And if you know how many, just write them down. And if you don't know, okay, you don't know. But this is just for fun, okay? And if your answer to that question is IDK, which is text lingo for I don't know, how much effort do you, and hopefully you realize that if you don't know, I think you understand that you should know, right? So given that you should know and you don't know, how much effort would be required to at least make a close approximation? Is it something you could find out very quickly with little or no effort? Or are you on the other end of the spectrum where it would take an awful lot of effort? And if you're on this end of the spectrum, and if your answer to this was a 9 or a 10, then odds are your AI system looks like that slide. Everything's buried and patched together. And over time, lines upon lines of code, algorithms upon algorithms have been added over time. Data scientists, you hire data scientists, data analytics people, they come and go. They've developed their models, haven't necessarily left a good crumb trail, right, as to where all that came from. And you can very easily get onto this end of the scale where you have a hodgepodge of automation and losing control and definitely losing insight as to how all of that, where it all came from and how it all stitches together. So that's what we want to try and prevent. But it's good to start off where you are on this spectrum, so at least you know where you're starting from, okay? So here's a quick survey. Just a rough guess, what percent of your organization's business rules are fully documented and managed? And is your, put your answer and estimate as a percent, or maybe you totally don't know. And for this, just for fun, enter into the chat box your answer. Just want to see, just to get a feel for where everybody is on this spectrum, okay? So every organization has business rules. And if you don't know what percentage of your business rules are documented and managed, fine. If you do know, please enter in that percent. I'm going to take a quick peek at the screen, and it looks like, okay, we're as high as 90%. Great, John. And we're seem to be a lot in the middle, 60%. And then a few in the lower end. And that's, that's okay. What's important here is it's not good or bad, whether you're high or low. If you're high, you've got your challenge is to keep it there, right? If you're low, then your challenge is to boost it up and keep working your way up. So this is a good thing to do. It's just kind of do this as a quick thought question to get you thinking about, all right, where's my starting point in all of this? Because it is important. This is one of the first steps in achieving knowledge governance. Okay, great. Thanks for your responses. Let's go on. So first, some semantics. We talked about semantics last week, definitions. Let's talk about what knowledge governance is not. Knowledge governance is not some lofty tribunal meting out punishment for anybody who dares not follow the rules that we set out for AI or for model and algorithm development or whatever it is we're doing here. That's not what knowledge governance is. So we can get that image out of our head. Knowledge governance is the means by which we establish rules, norms, and actions, identify structure, sustain them and regulate them, and hold people accountable. So again, it's putting adult supervision in place, not again as some lofty tribunal, but to put structure on a lot of that chaos from that early slide, everything smashed together, putting order to it. Knowledge governance, then, so that's the general definition of governance. Knowledge governance, what we mean by that is the means by which the rules and policies for managing your critical and machine knowledge are defined, applied, reconciled, and enforced. And of course, managing critical knowledge, that's knowledge management, right? Capturing, organizing, retaining, sharing, applying, etc. An organization's knowledge. And again, the emphasis here is our knowledge more and more now, KMers. If we are in knowledge management, we used to spend a lot of our time here with subject matter experts, managing SME knowledge, managing communities of practice, always human side. We've got to get over here on the machine side as well and work with both, okay? So far, so good. So here's an example. It's good to have some foundational principles as to what your AI governance will be founded upon. And you can go to Google's site, and I think they've got some good examples. I'll hold them up as an example. Here's exactly what Google says our AI principles are. We want to be socially beneficial, avoid bias, and we talked about that. Build and test for safety. We had a good example last week about safety. And where it was actually missing from a project that resulted in fatal catastrophe. Be accountable to people, incorporate privacy design, and we know this is very true. All the things that are going on with AI right now involve interacting with people, Internet of Things, watching everything you're doing. How does privacy, medical, using AI for medicine is great, but the privacy boundaries have to be understood and managed. Uphold high standards of scientific excellence and be made available for uses that accord with these principles. So that's Google. You can go, here's the citation, and you'll have this in your slide handout, so you can go and check that out. But an interesting thing about Google's governance, AI governance, they also say what they will not do, okay? Which is also a very good, clear thing to do as you're establishing your and formulating your AI governance model. So Google says we will not pursue technologies that cause harm, right, or will likely to cause harm. They will not pursue weapons or the technologies aimed at directly facilitating injury, right? Technologies that gather or use information for surveillance, violating internationally accepted norms. Now, few people might question that, but hey, again, lay it out. This is what we will not pursue. At least it puts it down and establishes what the boundaries are. And technologies whose purpose contravenes widely accepted principles of international law and human rights. So with those as examples, here is an exercise, and this is just a thought. We're not going to go through this right now, but at least get started right now on a piece of paper. Think about one or more foundational principles like Google has here that would provide a clear and firm basis for knowledge governance in your organization, or perhaps an organization that you work for or support or consult for. So start thinking about these. What would be one or more foundational principles? Okay, and if you want to share them in the chat, go ahead. But I'll move on. So there are 6 facets of knowledge governance. And here's another thing you can do. You can grab this slide when you get it in the handouts and keep it as a handy dandy worksheet, because this is a good way. There are 6 facets, key facets that we use in our knowledge governance. And it's another, again, a good place to start is taking a survey of where you are with regard to each of these. So number 1, facet number 1, roles and responsibilities regarding knowledge governance are clearly defined and embraced, right? And one of the messages here with regard to knowledge governance is everybody has a role, okay? But one person can't do it all and everybody can't do everything. So you need to define what each person's role and responsibilities are. And where are you now? That is on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low, the worst, 10 being excellent. Okay, so that's number 1. Question number 2, now competencies. You can define roles and responsibilities, but the person assigned that role and responsibility may not have the competency. You may not even know what they are. So a good part of knowledge governance is understanding the competencies required for each role and how they are developed and nurtured. And remember, things are changing, accelerating. So it's not just a matter of having somebody who can do it today. Keeping that skill up to date and keeping that competency up to date is important. On a scale of 1 to 10, where are you with that? Processes for knowledge vetting and knowledge assurance are in place, understood, and practiced. So the things we KMers do a lot of, knowledge elicitation and vetting and knowledge capture, again, if it's not just one K, if we're a KMer, odds are we're going to be spread thin. Everybody's got to have a role in this because there's just too much knowledge out there. Every person in the organization has their knowledge that they're applying in their work. So what are the processes for helping that knowledge vetting take place? Okay. Then links to organizational performance are known as and measured. This helps with the prioritization, very important, right? You only have so many resources. So what's important and where is the impact? Number 5, then training plans for humans and machines. And we'll talk about how to train machines too later on. So that's got to be there. And then finally, how do you socialize reward and recognition? To do maybe the first 5 may may likely require a cultural change, a change in work behaviors, the way people do things. Especially, we as KMers, we've encountered over the years the difficulty in knowledge sharing, right? Because people didn't want to share their knowledge. They felt keeping their knowledge, hoarding their knowledge made them more valuable. And we had to go through this socialization process, and other recognition and reward programs to overcome that hesitation. And the same thing is going to be likely occur as you try and implement a human and machine knowledge governance system in your organization. So those are the 6, and we'll go through each of them. First of all, what is this governance board? Again, not this lofty tribunal, but you should have a governance board put together, a formal governance board chaired by somebody at the executive level. The main reason for the executive level chairing this board, and it could be the chief knowledge officer. If you have a knowledge officer at the C-suite level, great, or it could be somebody else. But it has to be at the executive level, obviously, to give importance, lend credence to it, let it know that the organization is serious about this, and provide that strategic oversight from the C-suite as to what's going on at that level, and ensures that all stakeholders are representative in setting priorities and that sort of thing. So the chair is at that level, preferably. Then other C-suite representatives should be on your governance board as well. CIO, definitely. Chief Operating Officer, legal, HR, finance. It really, what we're doing, and hopefully it should be clear, that it cuts across all major aspects of an organization, right? There's no getting around it. It's no longer just the KM group and the IT group, let's say, okay? It's everybody. And now within that, there are some key processes. Remember, we had that flow down pyramid when we talked about understanding the business needs. And we started at the high level with the strategy and then worked our way down. And we worked our way down at the lower end of that pyramid were the key processes. So those, if you've identified critical processes that help drive the organization's strategy and mission, they should be represented, as well as specific domains that are essential to those processes. So there's process knowledge and domain knowledge, hopefully something that's familiar to us as KMers. Representatives from those key areas should be on this board, okay? All right, and let's I'll give you some examples of each, just so we make it clear that there's a distinction between process knowledge and domain knowledge. Process knowledge examples could be all these processes and standards that you want people to abide by and apply. The knowledge vetting process itself, right? There's a discipline independent process through which each knowledge vetting takes place. So that's a good example of process knowledge. All that taxonomy and ontology development we talked about last week, that needs to be in a stat, not a mishmash. It can start off that way, even if it's automated, firmly established process in place, and the knowledge for that, and the crumb trails as to how that was developed and how it continues to be refined because things are changing, right? Training programs, okay, and others. So these are just some examples to get you thinking, but you'll need to identify what process knowledge comes under, should be part of your governance model and should come under your governance system. Okay, that's process knowledge. So again, you have this worksheet in your slide handout that you'll get, but think about in your own organization, what are the key processes in your organization that would most benefit from being incorporated into your knowledge governance model or system. Okay, and just think about those and list those. Okay, that's process knowledge. Same for domain knowledge. And here are some examples. Law, right? And especially now when the more we delve into AI and the more we delve into human machine collaboration, we talked about systems that monitor human discourse, people's texts, emails. You're evaluating those, looking for weak signals. Privacy definitely comes into play there. So you've got to work with law and your legal members of the legal profession that are on your team to make sure that those matters are taken into consideration properly. Data science is another great example of domain knowledge that should be not, and again, I see too often people, organizations put out ads and they want to hire data scientists. They hire these data scientists. They say, here's what we need to do. And the data scientists crunch away the models, statistics, but not leaving those crumb trails. And that data scientist gets another job offer, goes somewhere else. Next one comes in trying to figure out what that past data scientist did or didn't do, or just said, throws their hands up and said, I'm going to do it my way anyway. Well, what is their way, right? Hopefully you see the importance of knowledge governance, the role of knowledge governance in stabilizing these very tight domains where people tend to be very esoteric. People tend to come and go sometimes, and not leaving any kind of crumb trail or knowledge trail, if you will. Same for the world of software development. Agile is very important right now. Agile tends to be something that's often done loosely. UX, UI design, things like Nielsen Norman, right? Do you use Nielsen Norman for your usability? That should be captured and managed. Systems engineering, which we said last week, was often disconnected from project management and the other aspects of a project, right? So by capturing this domain knowledge, you also as we did in the ontology exercise last week, beginning to show the cross connections, even though these all use their own language, right? Part of your knowledge governance and where KM has a great role to play is connecting all of these different pieces and getting the communication and the knowledge to flow more smoothly, where in very many cases there are barriers and walls and silos separating these different aspects. Okay. All right. So hopefully that gives you plenty of examples to work with. And I'm just taking a quick look at the comments here. Yeah, Lene, right? Requires updates to the organizational goals and culture. Right. Lene makes a great point in the chat box there. This approach requires updating organizational goals and culture in order to be successful. That's exactly right, and often starts with the behavior, modifying behaviors. And yes, you may. So you're likely to find the more you get into this, the more likely you're to find that, hey, some of the practices, what you thought were best practices, are actually out of date. So yeah, good point, Lene. There's a circular process going on here. We often call that a cycle, and John Lewis's cycle is very good. So let me throw in a plug for John Lewis's cycle. And a simple way is innovation and learning, innovation and learning. Every time you introduce something new, you've got to learn from that and update your principles and practices. Okay, going all right. So the same thing in a worksheet. Think about.
There's one more question.
Okay, let me take a look.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Knowledge of insurance, banking, retails, essentially industry, business knowledge. Are they not the core of domain knowledge?
Oh yeah, well I actually put, the CFO and the finance there. Now insurance, banking, and retails, that may be more dependent upon whatever market your organization is in and whatever your market serves. But that's exactly the kind of question you need to be asking here, Manoj. And that's why you go up to that strategy flow down pyramid that we showed last week, where we and earlier, where we linked KI and KM and AI to the business needs. So what you're listing there, Manoj, is a perfect example of business needs, but they are different for every organization. So that question needs to be asked at every time. Okay, good. All right. So one of the main functions of the governance board then is conflict resolution. Because if you do have all these different stovepipes and people involved, you're going to come up with hey, who owns what? Battling over resources and prioritization. And that again is why I say very often the performance goals and objectives and measures and metrics help assign those priorities. Likewise, understanding what business you're in, what your mission is, overall mission and goals, things that are directly impacting and help achieving the strategic goals of the organization will have higher priorities than those that do not, because yeah, you have limited resources, everybody's competing, but this governance board at least puts some structure to making these decisions, right? Hopefully that makes sense. And policy and guidelines, you can't explicitly state everything, because then you get this craziness. We have thousands and thousands of pages of guidelines. You don't want that. You want broad guidance, and then occasionally you need interpretation by a board. Okay, that's plenty there on knowledge governance. What's important now also in implementing and maintaining knowledge is always managing and mitigating the risks, particularly with regard to AI, because we said AI can go rogue. So let's go a little bit into what those risks are. If we're embracing AI and adopting AI and adopting hyper automation more and more, which there's no holding back that tide. Remember, 50% of organizations already have some kind of automation in, and it's soon to be 100% in the next 5 years. Here's another good worksheet that you'll have in your handout, and some of you may have used this already. It's called a risk register. So it basically identifies the type of risks, right? Just go ahead and list those out. What are the things that can go wrong? But then also include what gives rise to that risk? What are the root causes and conditions? What are the impacts? Remember, you can have, and probability, you can have something with low probability, high impact. You can have something with high probability, but very low impact. You have to, make your prioritization decisions based on that. And then what is the outcome? And then prioritize, put your prioritization in place. What is the cost incurred if that risk were to manifest itself? What is your mitigation strategy then? And then there's a cost associated with that. And then think about what would trigger implementing that, because you can't, again, your resource constraint, you can't put up guards and protections for every possible risk and outcome. Can't be done. So part of the challenge then is, okay, maybe I can incorporate triggers so I can get early warning. Remember like those weak signals we talked about last week. What would be some triggers then that would allow me to not have to build in all the mitigation up front, but triggers so that I can get some early warning and then enact a mitigation strategy along the way. So that's all of the considerations that go into understanding risk. But by the way, the benefit of doing this, if you carefully do think this out, you'll have the benefit of creating greater resilience in your organization. And that's a term I think we're hearing a lot more of, right? Agility, not only agility, but then resilience, because we get these what are called black swan events, whether it be COVID or something else, a perturbation in the financial markets. How resilient is our organization to absorb and recover from some event, disaster, whether it be a weather event, climate event? Okay, so here's some examples, just in case, just to make it clear. There are business risks, right? You may suddenly find yourself blocked off from accessing certain markets, right? Some external partners may decide to separate from you and go do business with a competitor, right? So you get the idea. There are all kinds of business risks that you have to contend with, financial risks, okay? Regulatory change, these happen all the time. When at least in the US here, every time a new legislative action comes before Congress, there are thousands of pages, okay? They're all rippled down and impact businesses and organizations, right? The talent market is going crazy right now and always has. How do you attract and retain talent in a turbulent market? And technology, of course, changing all the time. So I just list these. These are all the risks you should be if you're, you don't want a system that's so brittle. And this is why Nassim Taleb, Nicholas Taleb, has a book out called Anti-Fragile. I don't know if you've seen that book, Anti-Fragile. This is building anti-fragility into your system. But we can do this as part of our governance, making sure that we're not, that we're, oh, and by the way, these risks can either be upside or downside. They can either present as mean disaster or opportunity, right? All of these disruptions could present new opportunities for you, right? I hope that's clear. People tend to think of risks always the downside risk and all the terrible things that can happen. But there are those smart people who, when a disruption occurs, they're salivating because they see upside opportunity. Okay, and that's external risk, internal risk the same way, right? Estimation errors. I'm no need to go through all these. You'll have these in your handout, but this just gives you, again, more ideas for the types of internal risks that we're facing, especially as we move toward more AI and automation. Okay, so again, don't need to go through all these, but it's a good handy dandy list to get you thinking about all the internal risks. And again, any one of these can open up opportunities as well as taking care to protect the downside, right? Okay, so a quick exercise then for you to think about, given all of that. Won't go through it now, but think for yourself. What are some of the greatest external risks your organization is facing? And what are some of the key process areas that carry the greatest risk? Okay, so you see how all this is coming together. We talked about key processes, talk about those risks, internal and external, that you need to be aware of, and then going back to that risk register, prioritizing and determining, okay, what resources do I allocate toward mitigation and in what phase, in what time phase, right? Again, a lot of moving parts, but very, very important. If it sure beats doing things that you can do things ad hoc if you want and take your chances, or governance will help put some structure and management to this. Okay, so some ways that KM can help. We did this last time. We showed in that example, data and text analytics. You can monitor both what's in your customers' discourse, your employee discourse. And by the way, in terms of monitoring employee texts and emails, people right away say, "Oh no, well then that people are going to not going to like that because it violates privacy." Believe it or not, we found in a couple of instances that we've done this, the employees were happy. They were happy that somebody was listening, because very often the employee discourse is one of frustration, saying upper management never listens to us. They have problems. They're aware of problems that upper management is missing. So, again, you have to worry about privacy, but don't be surprised if people actually, once they understand this, warm up to having their discourse monitored, so you can detect these weak signals, detect those possible risk areas, and mitigate them early rather than later. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Okay, that's one. Here's another, I'll give you another little tip, because there are many, many ways to manage and mitigate risk. One thing I hope is clear is, as we it goes back to those business rules. How many business rules do you have? You dive into your processes, you'll end up with thousands, tens of thousands of business rules, comparisons, patterns. That becomes very unwieldy. So if you're in it, is anybody familiar with cyclomatic complexity? If not, there's a link there. But here's an interesting and possibly innovative idea. Software developers use this all the time. It's been around since the 70s, and it helps software people. If you're familiar with the term spaghetti code, right? Code on top of code, you patch, you have a new software, somebody makes a change and they add a change on top, and pretty soon you've got all kinds of unwieldy software. Cyclomatic complexity is a technique for minimizing the paths, removing redundant paths, and doing what is called refactoring, keeping your software flows in the most efficient way possible. All right. I'm suggesting learning about that, or working with somebody in your software development side of the house that understands and uses cyclomatic complexity, and apply that to AI algorithms and even your knowledge management, understanding the knowledge flows in your organization, process flows. This tends to be, again, one of those. Here's a good example of a siloed process. This is typically used solely in the realm of software development. Yet we do the same thing when we do process modeling, right? And when we do decision trees, and we're doing all of this in our KM work. But very quickly, our process models start getting very complex with redundant paths or erroneous paths. We can borrow a well-proven over decades approach from the world of software and apply it to our own work in knowledge management, and in particular in AI. Okay, so you can read further on that. I just leave that there as kind of a little gift, no extra charge, of one example of how you can take something from a domain that's been running all by itself and apply it across the board. Okay, and don't forget that risk register. All right, got to keep moving here. I want to say a word about trust. Okay, trust is important. Without trust, all this stuff is meaningless. So we've learned that from knowledge sharing, okay? In a low trust organization, people are afraid to share knowledge, all right? So you have to, and this is why it's important to have that C-suite person or several people from this executive level on the governance board, because you need to, and this goes back to the question about cultural change. People need to be safe with doing this. No fear of retribution. If you're going to share knowledge, if you're going to speak openly and freely, there can't be, fear of retribution, all right? So create a safe environment, what Dave Snowden always calls a safe fail environment, not a fail safe, but a safe fail environment, and be congruent. Say what you mean and do what you said you would do. Those are good rules to be open, honest accountability. I point this out only because as you get into the types of things we're talking about, including sharing knowledge and common language and common understanding, there has to be trust, more openness, more transparency, and more trust. Without that, you're going to struggle. All right. And when it comes to trust, less is more, okay? If trust is spread out too thinly, that breaks as well. A good example is in the United States intelligence community. You remember the Vault 7 release? It was all those top secret applications that were leaked out to the world. And when they tried to find out where the leak occurred, there were 7,000 people that had access. So one of those 7,000, they had to find one out of those 7,000 people who leaked the information. So again, reducing that trust footprint, if 7,000 people are keeping a secret from however many other thousand are in your organization, that's a problem, okay? So that's just another something to think about. If we're moving into the knowledge age, there has to be more transparency and openness. I'm not saying you share proprietary things and things of that nature, but just try to keep that trusted footprint as small as possible. And the more openness you have, the less you have to worry about trust violations. All right, let's go to, we need to talk about training. On the human side, right, as you're vetting knowledge, watch out. The humans, have their pride of ownership. They don't like other people incurring on their territory. Bad habits can creep in and they don't realize it. Sometimes the experts are wrong on the knowledge vetting. And machine side, especially with regard to neural nets, there's supervised and unsupervised learning. Here's training the AI machine learning system. You start off with a neural net. This is just using neural nets as an example, but any type of algorithmic system can apply equally. I have a subject matter expert who develops a training data set, trains that neural net and fine tunes it. Great. Good practice is then to take that trained set and introduce a different person to then refine that data, expand that data, and then refine that neural net with a new set of data, what we call development data, right? Better yet, that then produces a third neural network. Bring in a third SME to run some real world, including noisy test data through that neural net and do the fine tuning. Very often, this is all done by one person, and there's a good source of risk. You only have one point of view that's developing and fine tuning the neural net. And so what do you think? There's that neural net is going to be biased toward that original subject matter expert. By putting more experts into the process, you can reduce that bias and get a more rich set of rules. And again, whether this be a neural net, which is black box, or where you're just tweaking the weights and the values, or if this is a set of algorithms, this is a set of code, algorithmic code. Either way, it kind of applies to the same way. And then you finally get your production system there. All right. So say there's same approach for AI algorithms, get that second and third opinion. All right. Cautionary tale. Remember, training humans and machines. there are examples all over. Fatal crash of American Airlines was another example. This was where the humans were not trained properly in the simulator. The pilots, according to the black box, when they were investigating the fatal crashes, they did exactly what they were trained to do in the simulator, but the simulator was wrong. Hence, the humans were trained wrong. And we saw our 737 MAX example last week also. And there, the pilot training was not in sync with the software. So AI, the message here is AI knows only what it's been trained to do. And the more adult supervision, the more eyeballs, the more experts you can put on that training process, running those simulations ahead of time, putting together that risk register and really revealing what can go wrong. Okay, and then what's the probability of going wrong? And maybe the probability was low, but the impact was high. Fatal crash is a high impact event. Then you make your adjustments accordingly as part of your governance. Okay, now I'm going to go through this next part quickly because we sort of know this in the discussion before we leading up, when everybody was signing on, we were talking about soft skills. The human capital side of AI involves, certain soft skills, knowledge, skills, and abilities. So soft skill, if we KMers, this is important, if we KMers now are going to take on the role of implementing this or in promoting, evangelizing, doing all of those things we talked about in knowledge governance, we need to have you better have good facilitation skills, right? Better have good analytical skills as well. At least understand. Don't have to be a knowledge engineer, but at least appreciate what goes into knowledge engineering and make sure that the people who are doing it have the right skills, right? So there's soft skills, analytical skills, technical skills, and subject matter expertise, all combined go into this, okay? A little bit more elaboration on the soft skills, right? Understanding and these are clearly human things that AI and machines cannot do. Humans do this well, right? Explaining principles and foundational principles and truth, identifying bias, pattern, identifying anomalies in patterns, okay? Gathering, using evidence, thinking strategically, okay? Again, you can go through this list, think about this list a little bit more later, but these are things humans do, and this is why it's essential to have this human element to our governance, right? Human learning. So as you're looking to have people perform this knowledge governance, they should understand learning behaviors, right? If you're talking about changing behaviors, changing the culture of an organization, or at least modifying it, you've got to understand the psychology, right? How to do that. Remember, we talked about selling executives, fear and pain and pleasure, right? Psychology. All of these changes come from the standpoint of pain and pleasure. The pain being, the airplane crash and the deaths that occurred. The pleasure coming from, wow, we're performing, we're growing our market, we're doing well, and we're all getting raises and bonuses. Okay, so here again, this is another laundry list of good soft skills to develop in order to better implement this governance process. Okay. So I'll let you, again, won't go through all these. You can go through that worksheet. And here's a similar worksheet or a similar checklist for analytical skills, right? How do you produce, when we do those knowledge graphs? And this went into that, the case example we gave last week on the Boeing 737. The computer generated data visualizations in the form of a knowledge graph, but still, humans, the computer didn't exactly tell you everything that was in there. Humans had some insight into that and said, oh, wow, look what this is telling me. 3 hops away, I can make a connection that wasn't apparent to the people working on the project. Things like that, okay? So develop these skills, knowledge, skills, and abilities in your people so that you can better do this. And again, it will open up amazing worlds to you, okay? Same way as subject matter expertise, right? We know who those are. But the subject matter experts, as he said, got to get out of that mode of protecting their knowledge and keeping it to themselves. Everybody should be a mentor to somebody else. Everybody in an organization should have a mentor, and everybody in the organization should be mentoring somebody. Does that make sense? That keeps that knowledge flow going, breaks down the barriers, right? Everybody mentors somebody, and everybody is mentored by somebody. Okay, technical skills, boom. I don't think we need to go through that. I want to move along here, getting close to the end. The performance impacts we've talked about. Okay, getting the knowledge right. Okay, knowledge assurance, accuracy, timeliness. So in other words, if you're developing these metrics, they clearly accuracy, timeliness, all those things that are important should be part of it. Integrity, maintaining that crumb trail, knowing where something came from, and transparency, provenance, the same idea. Who came up with this? Where did it come from? What is the the audit trail, the crumb trail? Maintaining privacy and security with regard to knowledge. Okay. No one. Here's a slide I put together. This is important. No one left behind. Anybody familiar with ISO standard 40500? You should be, because part of no one left behind, it's easy for us that do not have any challenges or disabilities, visual or otherwise, to go through all this and manage all this complexity. But whether it be customers, employees, there are people who do not have the same abilities that we have, but yet we can accommodate them. So there's something called the worldwide, the WWW Consortium's Web Accessibility Initiative, okay? And they have guidelines for making web content and all content, knowledge, information accessible to people with physical, hearing, all kinds of impairments. Do you ever think about photosensitivity? Your display may be fine, but any kind of flicker or brightness set in the wrong way can affect people, okay? So if you're for instance, if you're in the US government, you have to abide by these. And if not, you could get into serious trouble. So I point this out in that, remember, leave no one behind. Always, as you're doing these data visualizations and developing that UX, UI, that user experience and user interface, don't forget the people who may not have been born with, or through some accident or whatever, do not have the same physical abilities that you have, and they can be taken care of. Remember, doing simple things like when you put an image up on the screen, having text behind that image. All right. Finally, do you perform? Oh yeah, go ahead, Annie.
Art, you want to answer a quick question, or you want to finish that one up?
Yeah, let's grab it.
Okay. How do you measure soft skills? What are some recommendations to see where the people within your organization can be leveraged towards the right projects?
Soft skill development is more. It's the best way to measure it is to have people do it, to practice it. So one that comes to mind off the top of my head, there are a bunch of them. Facilitation. All right. If you're working on a project team, I know me, this is my own personal experience. As I got into project management and working on teams, my company sent me off to training class to learn not only basic communication skills, but facilitation skills. So that's it. Number one, training and doing. And I learned by doing, all right? We each had to actually do a project and demonstrate what we were learning in terms of developing facilitation. Facilitation is an important soft skill. I will give you, I'll make a note here. There's something called the Team Language Coefficient, TLC. I will send that to everybody when I pop up these, when I post these slides. Are you familiar with the Gini coefficient? The Gini coefficient is used by the World Bank and other and the United Nations for measuring income inequality, right? So the higher the coefficient, the greater the inequality, the lower the coefficient, the less the inequality. A guy by the name of Marquette, he was a submarine commander. He took that formula for the Gini coefficient and created a language coefficient. That's where you can actually measure using the, whether it be the conversation or the emails exchanges, the text messages, part of your text analytics can be the coefficient that says, is somebody hogging the conversation? So when that coefficient, when that language coefficient is 0, it means nobody is hogging the coefficient. Everybody has an equal voice, right? So your facilitation is good. If one person is hogging the coefficient, that coefficient is near 1 or very high, that shows that one person is dominating, and that can, of course, lead to trouble. So that's a couple of examples that come to mind, both unmeasurable, where you just simply learn by doing and improve by doing and practice, and another one where you can actually quantitatively measure whether the equality of balance in a conversation among a team. Okay. Going back to these metrics, remember we talked about these last time. You can develop KPIs, right? So time to decision. Here's some other metrics. Time to gather. How long does it take to gather and assess evidence, right? Time to make a decision. How much rework. So point is, you come up with some high-level performance metrics and develop KPIs. We talked about that last week. I just want to reinforce it again this week. They're appropriate, but it's important. What works in one organization may not work for another. You've got to come and to find out what's most important to you. Is it timeliness? Is it quality? Often it's all of the above. And then, okay, in your processes, your work processes, where are the touch points and how can you measure improvement in those touch points that rise to reaching these, which then makes overall performance, organizational performance improve. Okay, I think we're at the end here, getting close to the end. Oh, culture. Do you know? Yeah, here's some soft metrics. Is there a strong connection to KM and AI, right? Known impact of ontology management. We talked about that. If you begin to apply these, what is, and then measure over time the change in performance, and if you can link it to what you've been doing with regard to KM and AI and knowledge governance, then fine, you can then use that to reinforce and improve your socialization, right, and evangelization of knowledge governance. Okay, so again, sharing best practices. Oh, here's a good one. People are working remotely. Good KM test. Is everybody now I do know people are sharing practices about working remotely because they're sharing them using tribal knowledge transfer. They're saying, hey, guess what I found? Guess what I found? But are you sharing them in a structured way so that everyone can benefit, not just one person telling another? Okay. All right. Impact on organization strategy.
Is this the last slide?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah. You've seen this already. Bonus, right. So last slide would be, what's the number one performance metric? Value to the customer. Okay. How do you deliver value? Because the customer, the paying customer, or the constituent, if you're a nonprofit organization, is the most important, and that should be. So with that, I'll have to, that's the summary. This is the, for further reading, you can see this in your handout, and that's the end. So, yep, I covered a lot again, but thank you. And any last thoughts?
Okay, so any additional questions? Of course, you have thank yous from several people. So now we're ending. So for those who didn't join us at the beginning of our lesson, and for those who forgot what we were speaking about, I will remind us that on session 23, August 31st, each one of you are going to speak 1 minute, one slide. What? I'll show you. Just a minute. Share screen. Here we are. You will tell us what you think, what you take out of this course. If you have no constraints, if you can do whatever you wish, What AI project would you start or join? What would be your role? What your contribution as an as a KMO? And if there's additional knowledge or skills that you need for that, please note them, tell us, share us, and we will see if all of us as a big team can really help you in taking it one step forward. So that's a reminder, and please send it to me until August 27th. I'll send it to you on mail. Thank you all. Any last questions? Someone who wants to raise his hand and ask a question? No. So thank you all. We have any questions on our chat? Annie, you are always.
No, there's no more questions on the chat.
Just so many thanks out there. Thank you very, very much, Art, on behalf of all of us. And next week, I'll be speaking. Art, you could be, you can rest. You can furnish your voice. Bye all.
All
Thank you
right.
very much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you,
Thank you. Bye-bye.
everyone.
Okay. I think we're ending. Thank you, Art.
Okay, yep.
Yes, I think that now you can lower your intensive workforce.
Okay,
We have left 4 sessions. One Annie will be giving, and the 3 others I'll be giving.
yes, lessons learned. I mean, that's a good lead in
Yes.
for next week.
Yes, so I finished a bit the presentation and refined it. I'll send you it in advance. Art, did you share the slides of today already?
No, and but I'm going to add that teen language coefficient that's a good metric, and so I'm going to add that to the end as an appendix, and then I'll pop up I can't post them still. I still can't post them to the Google Drive, so I have to send them to you, and then you have to post them.
I also don't post them, but please send Ellie a mail that you cannot do it yet, so and ask him to fix it, okay?
Okay. At least as of last week, I could not.
And I will also remind him when I send him the materials, I will also remind him that it would be easier if he also gives us permissions to upload materials.
Sure. Okay.
Thank you all. Have a nice
Thank you.
day.
Have a,
Thank you.
yes.
Bye.
And see you next week.
See you
Yes,
next week.
bye.
Good job, Art. Bye-bye.
Yeah, nice job, Art. He's
Vincent,
gone.
get in Phuket.
Yes, I'm in Phuket. Now the next challenge is going to be to go back to Bangkok, because currently they have isolated completely the island. There is no more flights. You're not allowed to travel by car. So it looks like I might be stuck on the island for quite some time until because the situation is not so good in different regions of Thailand. So they try to isolate each of the different regions, and Phuket is they stop all the flight to Phuket and everything. So anyway, there is a worse place to be than to be stuck here. But the problem is that I had to renew a lot of my work permit, my visa, all of these important documents, and I really did need to be in Bangkok in 2 weeks from now. So hopefully by then some of the rules we may have changed, but yeah, let's see. Great, thank you so much for your contribution, also for the Mike Award, and so we'll be in touch soon. Okay.
Bye.
Okay.
Have a nice day.
Take a good care. Thank you, Maria. Bye-bye.
Bye.